Picture this, 9th century England, where kings wear crowns, bishops write stern letters, and absolutely nobody has discovered the concept of don't start a civil war while an invasion fleet is parking offshore. Welcome to the Battle of York in 867, an episode so chaotic it feels like history's way of saying teamwork matters and timing matters even more. York, then known as Ælla to the Anglo-Saxons, was not just another settlement with muddy streets and a strong opinion about sheep. It sat at the confluence of the Ouse and Foss rivers, on a position with real logistical muscle, river access, established fortifications, and long strategic significance dating back to Roman occupation. In short, if you wanted to control northern England, York was the big, blinking "capture this" icon on the map. Now for the domestic situation inside Northumbria, not ideal. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the Northumbrians had deposed their king Osberht, often rendered Osbert, and accepted Ælla, who had no natural claim. That is Old English annal speak for politics were an absolute food fight. So when a serious external threat arrived, Northumbria was less united kingdom and more angry group chat. Into this stepped the Viking Great Army, which had landed in England in 865 and moved north. Later traditions connect leadership to figures such as Ivar and his brothers. The core point, supported by major sources, is that this was not a quick smash-and-grab raid, but part of a larger campaign of conquest. By 866, York had fallen to the invaders. Britannica's entries on Ælla, Ivar, and Northumbria all align on that key sequence: Viking capture, then Northumbrian attempt to reverse it, and deadly consequences in 867. York archaeology's synthesis gives a useful operational detail. The Vikings attacked York on 1 November 866 and seem to have taken it without much trouble, because Northumbria was still divided. Ælla wasn't captured in that first phase, which meant a rematch was coming. And if history teaches us anything, it's that unresolved royal rivalries plus heavily armed Scandinavians usually equals prepare your memorial plaques. Then came spring 867. The rivals, Ælla and Osberht, finally put their feud aside and assembled a force to retake York. On paper, this looks heroic, former enemies reconciling to save the realm. In practice, it was the medieval equivalent of two managers who spent 6 months sabotaging each other, suddenly trying to run a crisis meeting 5 minutes before the building inspection. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says the Northumbrians fought at York, broke into the town, and then suffered an immense slaughter, with both kings killed on the spot. That phrase is cold, brief, and devastating. No epic speech, no tidy duel, just brutal close-quarters collapse in and around a fortified urban center. In one stroke, Northumbria lost both rival claimants, the entire top row of the org chart. An independent annal from Ireland, the Annals of Ulster, corroborates the core result. The dark foreigners won a battle over the northern Saxons at York, and Ælla fell there. Different source tradition, same headline. Viking victory, Northumbrian leadership decapitated, strategic city retained by the invaders. And if you're wondering, yes, this is the part where the post-battle storytelling gets dramatic. Later traditions add lurid details about Ælla's death, including the notorious Blood Eagle. But the near-contemporary chronicles are comparatively terse: battle, slaughter, kings dead. That gap between sparse early records and flamboyant later legend is your reminder that medieval history comes with commentary tracks, fan fiction, and political branding attached. What happened next is strategically even more important than the blood and shouting. The surviving Northumbrians made peace with the Viking army. Viking leadership then worked through local arrangements, including installation of an Anglo-Saxon ruler, Egbert or Ecbert, under their influence, while campaigns continued elsewhere, such as operations into Mercia and Nottingham. This wasn't random raiding anymore. This was conquest with administration, governance by proxy, and sustained military mobility.
So why does the Battle of York matter beyond one very bad day for two kings? Because it helped lock in a Scandinavian power center in northern England. York became Jórvík, a major Viking Age city and political hub. Britannica summarizes the long arc. The Great Army captured York in 866. Scandinavian control endured for generations, and independent Scandinavian rule in York ended only when the last ruler was expelled in 944. That is not a raid. That is a regime shift. Over time, this changed the texture of England itself, politically, economically, linguistically. The wider Viking era in England fed into the world we shorthand as the Danelaw, where Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon systems collided, merged, and improvised new norms. Even educational material from the British Museum emphasizes that Viking towns like York became major trading centers and issued coinage. In other words, the people who arrived with swords also arrived with scales, dies, workshops, and account books. Conquest meant commerce, and commerce stuck. Archaeology in York reinforces this long-game perspective. The Coppergate excavations transformed our understanding of Viking Age urban life, showing how deeply stratified and materially rich the city became after its capture.
Organic preservation, craft evidence, trade indicators, the works. York archaeology even notes that some hastily buried skeletons found at Coppergate may relate to the violence of 867, though that specific identification remains cautious rather than definitive. Still, the broader picture is clear. York didn't just survive the 9th century, it became one of its defining urban laboratories. Now, if you're scoring the strategic lessons like a very grim sports analyst, Lesson 1, internal division is an invasion multiplier. Lesson 2, reclaiming a fortified city from experienced occupiers is hard even when your cause is righteous. Lesson 3, if your emergency coalition forms only after the enemy already has your capital, your odds are statistically uncharitable. Lesson 4, the winners write administrations, not just battle songs. And the final irony? The Battle of York in 867 is remembered as a catastrophe for Northumbria, but it is also the hinge that produced one of the most famous Viking cities in Europe. The same event that ended one political order launched another. History does that a lot. One side gets an elegy, the other gets an infrastructure plan. So when you tell this story on YouTube, don't frame it as just Vikings beat Saxons. Frame it as a masterclass in timing, coalition failure, and strategic geography, plus a cautionary tale for every government that thinks domestic feuds can wait until after the foreign policy crisis. They cannot. In 867, York proved that point with swords, fire, and 2 dead kings. And yes, if you were wondering, this is not the War of 1812 Battle of York. Different century, different empire, same city name, equally energetic property damage. Medieval England did it first, and with fewer uniforms.